Make sure to check out my Kofi account, link down in the description. And check out my other series, Modern Classics and TV Treasures. I got it bad and that ain't good. Good?
Brains.
Sal, can you come in here? Alrighty, boss. And welcome to Season 6 of 20th Century Reviews. Cue that intro.
Can't be done, I tell you. Can't be done.
Hello, I'm Henry R. Mockingbird, your host with the mustache. And what do you think of when you hear the word zombie? You probably think of something like this. Or this. Or if you're part of the tweenie crowd, you probably think of something like this. But before we had George Romero or Lucio Fulci, there was a different kind of zombie movie. Zombie movies mostly involved voodoo, or a doctor or scientist of some kind. Those zombies weren't flesh-eating ghouls as much as they were mindless slaves doing the bidding of their master. It wasn't until Night of the Living Dead where they pretty much became flesh-eating ghouls of the undead. And this leads me to the subject of today's review, White Zombie. So, let's get going. A young man turns to a witch doctor to lure a young woman that he loves away from her fiancé, but ends up turning her into a zombie, making the young woman the White Zombie. So, what do I think? Well, I like it. I think it has a very ethereal feel to it. It's very entertaining. But I gotta ask, what's with this poster? Seriously, it's the Frankenstein poster all over again. Well, at least this movie predicted the dark, for better or for worse. The film was based on a book called Magic Island, written by W.B. Seabrook. And unlike its predecessors, Dracula and Frankenstein, which were both made by Universal, White Zombie was an independent production. Yeah, an independent horror film, which doesn't sound like a whole lot today, given how we have dozens of independent horror films all over the place. But in 1932, that was a rarity. The film also used sets from both Universal and RKO, using sets from Dracula and Murders in the Rue Morgue. And it was one of the first horror movies to have a soundtrack, mostly using classical music. Artists like Gaston Borch, Hugo Riesenfeld, and many, many, many more that I don't have time to mention. And when the film was finally released, it was successful, spawning its own zombie subgenre, with several films using the mythology that was used in this film, as well as getting its own sequel called Revolt of the Zombie.
Franchise. 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 Franchise.
There's a huge fan of this movie. Someone small you might have heard of called Rob Zombie, who's a huge fan of this movie and even named the band White Zombie after this movie. We get a pair of eyes floating in the air and landing on top of the witch doctor, played by Bela Lugosi. He stops a coach, and a group of zombies show up, causing the coachmen to skedaddle off. They manage to get away from the witch doctor and the zombie. And yes, this is the very first film to utter the word zombie, uttered by the coachman.
They are not men, monsieur. They are dead bodies. Dead? Yes, monsieur. Zombies. The living dead.
And the couple, whose name is Charles and Madeline, meet up with a friend of the man of the house named Dr. Brewster, who I can best describe as a comedic version of Van Helsing. Very much like Van Helsing found out about Dracula, Dr. Brewster found out about the zombies later in the film. And he does have a few comedic lines, including a running joke where he's asking for a light for his pipe. And the man of the house, whose name is Nell, goes to see the witch doctor at the sugar plantation where the witch doctor's zombies work. And the sugar plantation and the zombies bring up a lot of parallels to slavery. And once you see the parallels, you cannot unsee them. And we see Nell meeting up with the witch doctor. Now, I know what a lot of you are probably thinking. Why am I referring to him as the witch doctor?
There's a good reason.
Well, his name is Murderer LeJohn, but they pretty much pull a Son of Kong and never call him that throughout the majority of the film. He's played by Bela Lugosi. He has an otherworldly type feel in a creepy way. Bela Lugosi manages to pull off being both scary and charming at the same time. Every time he's on screen, it's like you're under a spell. Let's talk about one of his zombie servants, who I like to call Fred. Look it up, you'll get a giggle. He kind of looks like a zombie version of Mr. Wink from Hellboy. And this movie's pre-coded, as evidence with a scene with Madeline in her underwear, and another scene where she tries to stab Charles with a knife, And it's not like Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, where you only see it in the shadows. No, you actually see it here. And during the climax, Charles shoots Fred the zombie in the chest, and we actually get to see the bullet wound. And the zombies commit full-on murder by drowning Nell's butler. Okay, back to the story. We get to see Madeline getting ready for her wedding, and outside, LeJohn is carving a wax figure out of her, in this case a candle, and we get to see his bird, who's a falcon. Well, at least he looks more convincing than the giant claw. And we see him burning her wax figure under fire. This form of voodoo would later be used in stuff like Temple of Doom or Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island. After burning her wax figure, we see her drop dead. And it's really cold seeing Charles hold Madeline's dead corpse. We even get to see the aftermath where he goes insane at the bar, only to later find out that Madeline isn't really dead. And Charles goes to Dr. Brewster. And we get a scene of exposition where the camera is focused on Charles' back. And we get the exposition about the zombies. And all of this is done in one take. And then it reverses back to Charles' back in the same shot. All the camera work in this scene feels like something Fritz Lang or Alfred Hitchcock would do. And now let's talk about the white zombie herself, Madeline, who I'm just going to refer to as the white zombie. She has what I would like to call an ethereal look, with her dead eyes that make her look like she's actually a member of the living dead. Some of the dresses she wears, like this one, you must have known the filmmakers were banking on this dress to be big, given how they used a promotional still of it. This movie is pretty much the underdog of horror movies of the time. Those who are looking for blood and gore might be disappointed with this movie, given how this movie mostly focuses on atmosphere, and especially given how Hollywood tends to remake a lot of horror films. I'm surprised this movie hasn't gotten a remake. I mean, come on. It's public domain. What's keeping them? Well, I guess we'll always have the goodness or greatness that is the original. I give it 5 gold stars. That's pretty much all I have to say about The White Zombie. Well, Season 6 of 20th Century Reviews has just begun. Well, until the next review, I'm Henry R. Mockingbird, your host with the mustache, signing off.